all of a sudden, so I'm going to drink water while I speak a little today. Okay, we're continuing our series on the good work. Of course, we're in Nehemiah. We're going to actually pick up in chapter 3. Had a little change today. Unfortunately, Mary had some car trouble on the way here, and she called and wasn't able to. They weren't able to get it going in time for her to get here. I was going to show a video with part of the scripture, but we're just going to listen to the sound of it. You're like, why are we doing a video? If you look at chapter 3 and you see all these names, you don't want me to try to read those. It would be horrible. So it's one of those that we're going to use somebody else's British accent to read that for us this morning, and I think we're still going to be able to pull that off with the sound at least. But we after last week, we had a little detour from this series, so I want to kind of catch us up a little bit so we all know where we are in the story of Nehemiah. Of course, we've been talking about the good work. What's the good work? Well, that's part of the question of this whole series, is what's the good work? And let me go ahead and just be like steal the whole plot of the whole thing. If we haven't figured it out yet, everything can be the good work, can it? Everything can be the good work. And that's part of what we're learning, but there's also specific things, and we've been talking about that for Nehemiah. So what happens here is that Nehemiah's love for God and his love for his people, they come together. They come together, and boy, when that happens, good things happen. So a little bit of background. Of course, we'll remember that the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah are actually one story. It's one story. Now, our Bible splits them, but in the Hebrew Bible, it's together. And if you read that together, it actually helps understand what's going on. Ezra focuses on the rebuilding of the temple, and Nehemiah focuses on the rebuilding of the gates and the walls. So why have they been torn down? So we'll back up just a little bit. After King David and Solomon, the kingdom of Israel splits into two, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, okay? And there's all kinds of challenges that happen. Eventually, both of them get conquered. The northern kingdom gets conquered in 721, and those folks are taken, this is BC, those folks are taken off into exile. And then the southern kingdom is finally conquered, and it's actually, there's a couple of different times they're taken into exile, but the last one is in 586, and that's when the walls are torn down and the temple is destroyed by the Babylonians. And most of them are taken into exile. So here we have two leaders with Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, they're born into captivity. They're not born free people. They have not lived there. Because it has, at best, been 142 years. So if you were part of the last group that was taken off, it's been 142 years. But they know their homeland. And they know, and they're heartbroken over what's going on. So what happens in chapter 1 is that Nehemiah, we find out about him, and he is serving as the cupbearer to the king, now in Persia. Now the Persians, under Cyrus the Mede, has allowed the exiles to go back. And that happens about 539, I believe. Let me check my dates on here. Yes, somewhere around there. 539, yeah, I got that right. 539. They were allowed to start going back. Well, Nehemiah comes in the picture around 544. So it's just a little bit after that, okay? So the exiles had gone back, had allowed to go back, but it's not home, so to speak, right? Walls have been torn down. The way they worship has been destroyed. They're not safe. There's nothing about it that's safe. So Nehemiah gets word from his brother that this is what Jerusalem is like. And Nehemiah is heartbroken over that. And we talked about that. He prays. He repented. And then he acts on that. So then he goes to the king and he tells the king that he worked for. Now he's a very trusted person to the king as cupbearer. And it sounds like a grunt job. It sounds like, okay, he's holding the cup, you know, how gifted is he in that? There's a lot more to it. He actually has the signet ring that gives him some authority. He's kind of a politician of sorts. So he has some authority with the king. Not over the king, but he has a voice with the king. So he goes to the king. He's very downcast. He expresses his emotions. He he asked for timber to actually repair the gates. And the king says yes to all of it. So he gets there, he surveys what's going on by himself. He rides the horse through there, he surveys it, he figures out what's going on. Then he gathers the leaders, and they have a conversation, and they're all like, yeah, let's do this. Let the good work begin. That's where we're picking up today. We're picking up in chapter 3. And I think a lot of times we tend to jump over these chapters because you look, I mean, guys, look at it. There's all these names. I mean, it's all these details of names. You're like, oh, it's horrible to try to read. But there's some really important things in there. So we're not going to jump over that today, but we're not going to read it. I'm not going to read it. So I'm going to attempt to do this. We don't have the video. In the video, it shows how, when all these names are being called out, it shows what section of the wall they built. But you can kind of visualize it as you hear it. They start at the sheep gate, and it goes clockwise all the way around Jerusalem. Okay? So let's see, Jonathan, we may need some help on that volume back there on the MP3 player. Let's try it. I'm going to try it here. All right, so we're in chapter 3, verses 1 through 32. Oh, get disconnected, Jonathan. Try to reconnect the... Is it connected? All right, we've got to make this work, so hang on one second. Give me a second, guys. It worked before the service, of course. All right, is the MP3 player connected? All right, we'll just give me 1 second here. Okay, hold it. Okay, it should be ready. Oh, so, you know what? We're going to play it through the microphone. We'll make it work that way. When one thing doesn't work, try another one, right? Okay. All right, you guys ready? We're going to do this the old-fashioned way.
Chapter 3. Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananiah. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zakur, son of Imri, built next to them. The fish gate was rebuilt by the sons of Hasenah. They laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Eremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired the next section. Next to him, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, made repairs. Next to him, Zadok, son of Baanah, also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. The Jeshimah gate was repaired by Joiada, son of Peseah, and Meshullam, son of Besodeiah. They laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Next to them, repairs were made by men from Gibeon and Mizpah, Melatiah of Gibeon and Jabal of Morodoth, places under the authority of the governor of Trans-Euphrates. Uzziel, son of Harahiah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section, and Hananiah, one of the perfume makers, made repairs next to them. They restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Rephaiah, son of Hur, ruler of a half-district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section. Adjoining this, Jedaiah, son of Harumaph, made repairs opposite his house, and Hattush, son of Hashabaniah, made repairs next to him. Malchijah, son of Harim, and Hashbuz, son of Pahath Moab, repaired another section and the Tower of the Ovens. Shalom, son of Halohesh, ruler of a half-district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. The valley gate was repaired by Hanun and the residents of Zanoah. They rebuilt it and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. They also repaired 500 yards of the wall as far as the dung gate. The dung gate was repaired by Malchijah, son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth Hakerem. He rebuilt it and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. The fountain gate was repaired by Shallum, son of Kol-Hoseh, ruler of the district of Mizpah. He rebuilt it, roofing it over and putting its two bolts and bars in place. He also repaired the wall of the pool of Siloam by the king's garden, as far as the steps going down from the city of David. Beyond him, Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, ruler of a half-district of Bethzur, made repairs up to a point opposite the tombs of David, as far as the artificial pool and the house of the heroes. Next to him, the repairs were made by the Levites under Rehum, son of Bani. Beside him, Hashabiah, ruler of Yelah, carried out repairs for his district. Next to him, the repairs were made by their countrymen under Bunui, son of Henadad, ruler of the other half-district of Kehalah. Next to him, Ezer, son of Jeshua, ruler of Mizpah, repaired another section from the point facing the ascent to the armory as far as the angle. Next to him, Baruch, son of Zabai, zealously repaired another section from the angle to the entrance of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. Next to him, Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired another section from the entrance of Eliashib's house to the end of it. The repairs next to him were made by the priests from the surrounding region. Beyond them, Benjamin and Hashub made repairs in front of their house, and next to them, Azariah, son of Maaseiah, the son of Ananiah, made repairs beside his house. Next to him, Binnui, son of Henadad, repaired another section from Azariah's house to the angle and the corner, and Palal, son of Uzai, worked opposite the angle and the tower projecting from the upper palace near the court of the guard. Next to him, Pedaiah, son of Barosh, and the temple servants living on the hill of Ophel made repairs up to a point opposite the water gate toward the east and the projecting tower. Next to them, the men of Tekoa repaired another section from the great projecting tower to the wall of Ophel. Above the horse gate, the priests made repairs, each in front of his own house. Next to them, Zadok, son of Immer, made repairs opposite his house. Next to him, Shemaiah Echaniah, the guard at the east gate, made repairs. Next to him, Ananiah, son of Shelemiah, and Hanun, the sixth son of Zadok, repaired another section. Next to them, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, made repairs opposite his living quarters. Next to him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, made repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and the merchants, opposite the inspection gate, and as far as the room above the corner. And between the room above the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and merchants made repairs.
All right. Did you guys get all that? I wish you could have seen the video, because it really helps you kind of understand how each of them participated in certain sections, which is exactly what happened. So I'm going to help break this down a little bit. Like, Marty, what in the world is the point? There's some really interesting things in there. I don't know if some of that stood out to you or not, but there's some really cool details that help us. So this is about 1.5 mile loop. Okay, about 1.5 mile loop. So they start at the sheep gate, and then these different, so part of what Nehemiah did is he assigned out, here's what we're going to work on. And so they start at the sheep gate, and they work their way around. So all these different families and these different groups are responsible for different sections. And it starts out in verse 5. It says that, actually, let's back up a little bit more. The priest did the sheep gate. And it's the only one that's dedicated right when they do it. And so, like, why did they do that? Well, the sheep gate would have been where they would have brought the sacrifices for the temple. Now, the temple has not been repaired yet. But when it is, that's where they're going to bring the sacrifices through. So they went ahead and dedicated that to the Lord. That there's significance there with the priest and what their role is. And then we have, and this is one of those sections that makes me laugh a little bit. I mean, it would be so embarrassing to be remembered for 2,000 years by this. But in verse 5, it says, the next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to work under their supervisors. I mean, how horrible would that be? Here they're remembered for 2,000 years plus, more than 2,000 years, because they didn't work. They didn't work. So that place, Tekoa, is actually the town where the prophet Amos is from. And there were these nobles there. And it's really, nobles don't like manual labor. So here it's taking everybody to do this work. And they're pulling these, scholarly folks together and going, hey, get to work. Well, they wouldn't work. They wouldn't work. It said they wouldn't put their shoulders into it under their supervisors. So that's there. You go a little bit further and it says in verse 12, the ruler of the half-district of Jerusalem worked with the help of his daughters. Did anybody hear that? Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? So here you've got the nobles that won't work, and then you've got a leader. The leader of the half district of Jerusalem. And what does he do? He's got his family. And there actually was a decree that everybody had to help. Men, women, children, everyone was to work. Now, we don't know how old these daughters are. Oh, we don't have any idea, but, they're working with their dad, so maybe we can make some assumptions there. But here they are, this was a family affair. A family affair. So they worked in sections. And then there's a little bit later in that, if you picked up on it, I love this part. It says the priests worked in front of their own house. So it was like, you're responsible for the part that's right in front of you. You're responsible to take care of that, the part that's right where you lived. And then there's a few professions that are named. But it's really interesting to me because it doesn't name the professions that you would think, right? Like brick masons or carpenters, or it doesn't name those, does it? Now, I feel certain they were there. But what did it name? Goldsmith and perfume makers. I don't know about you guys, but do you think that they had hard, calloused work hands? I mean, come on, the goldsmith and the perfume makers probably didn't have very tough hands, right? They probably got soft hands. And here they are, they're a part of this labor force. I mean, everybody is doing their part. The priests, the daughters, the goldsmith workers, and the perfume makers are specifically named, and none of these are wall builders. They're not. They're not wall builders. That's not what they do. But they join in and they do their part. So what does this do? I mean, this is a lot of names and town areas that people are from, and I just believe with everything in me that all of God's Word, all the details have purpose for us. It has value to us. And I want to share with you just some of the things that this has spoken to me and has reminded me about the good work as a church that we're about, as a family that we're about, all those things, the good work. I think the good work takes the whole community. I think that's what this teaches us. One of the things it teaches us. It takes the whole community. We need the kids. Girls, you're in here with us today. We need you. This church will not accomplish its mission without you. And I don't mean when you get big. I mean right now. We won't accomplish our mission as a church without you guys. You're invaluable to this work. It takes the whole community. And maybe it's kind of cool that it mentions the daughters, and that's what we have, right? We have daughters. It's neat. They were important to the building of the wall, and guess what? They're important to the mission of this church. We won't do it without you. We'll miss something important without you. It's a family affair. I see three things that are really important to me from this verse about the whole community being a part of it. Number one is good leaders always go first. Did you notice that? That the priest, and in Scripture, priests sometimes don't come across as very good leaders, right? I mean, the truth is the religious leaders in Jesus' day, it was constant conflict, right? They just didn't get it. But this is a place where the priests really do something great. They go first. They go first. I mean, they could have thought it was above them, but they didn't. They get in there and they go first. They lead well, and that's what good leaders do. We're all leaders in one way or the other. We're leaders in our households in some way. We're leaders of our grandparents. Our grandchildren. We're leaders as grandparents. We're leaders of our grandchildren. We're leaders of our children. We all, maybe in the workplace, whatever. We all have leadership roles. And I think one of the great principles, and something that I look for in leaders, and to be honest with you, it's one of the things that really bothers me about some of our leaders today and within the political realm, is good leaders should always go first. They should never ask people to do something that they're not willing to do themselves. And I say that to myself too. If I'm not willing to do something, I should never ask people to do it. Ever. Ever. Good leaders go first. In our households, good leaders as parents, if we want our kids to respect us, we go first. We model for them what we should be about. And then there's these nobles, these educated, scholarly folk, right? They didn't do it, did they? They didn't go to work. Now, how much respect are we going to have for those folks? And unfortunately, they're remembered for thousands of years by that. The next thing I think is important is it's a family affair. It's a family affair. If we want our kids to have a heart for others, then we need to involve them in serving others. It's important. If we want them to care about the good work of God's kingdom being built, we need to involve them in it. Now it slows us down, and listen, I'm guilty of this one. I gotta tell you. I am big time guilty of this one. That it's faster just to kind of like, just watch. I mean, it is, right? But it's not, that's not best. I thought of this time last year when we were going out to rice and beans and serving, and our kids came. Our kids came and they're dipping rice and they're dipping beans and they're participating in that, and so much what we do, we try to involve our kids. It's a family affair, and it has to be. We model the values we have by involving our kids and our grandkids. They did it. This was dangerous work. We're going to see a little later, there's a scripture, it says they worked on the wall with a tool in one hand and a sword in the other. This was dangerous work, but they involved their families in it. And the last thing I think is important about the work taking the whole community is sometimes we do things outside our giftedness to assist those who know what they're doing. I feel like I have to do that with it actually. But sometimes we do things because we're needed. And it's not really what we're gifted for. Here's the example. The goldsmith and the perfume makers were not wall builders. They weren't. Sometimes we just have to be a labor force. Sometimes we just have to be willing bodies. Sometimes we just have to say, yeah, I don't have a clue how to build that wall, but here you go. Tell me what to do. Marty, go pick that up. Got it. Go build it. Got it. And sometimes we just have to do it. Being a part of kingdom work requires that we do things that we aren't gifted for sometimes. But something interesting happens in that. Sometimes when we do that, we realize it's not that we weren't gifted for it, we just had never developed it. And sometimes when we do things because we're needed, not just because we're good at it, we realize, with a little work, I might be able to really be okay at this. I can develop this gift. And I bet that, I don't have proof of that, but I bet that some of that happened there as well. Sometimes our skills are needed so that we participate, we take the leads, and we provide help for others. We provide the labor force. We provide what they need. And it's not our skill set that makes the day. It's okay. It's our willingness to be a part of that. And there's this picture, do you guys see this picture that develops of a community that gets this right and gets this done, not because everybody had the gift that was needed, but together they had what was needed. That's the image. It's together they had everything they needed to accomplish this goal. It's pretty cool. It's pretty neat, actually. I mean, these were oppressed people. These were people who had come out of bondage. They had come back home. Many of them, or all of them, would have never been born there. It's been too many years. And here they are working together in order to accomplish something great for their people. So the big idea today is pretty simple. It's this. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. That's it. That's it. No one can do everything. Now, I have known people, and this will embarrass her, but my mom's basically one of these. It seems like there's not much she can't do. I mean, that's the truth. There's not much she can't do. And we have those people in our world, and we're grateful for them, aren't we? We're grateful for them. But even those incredibly gifted people like that, they can't do everything. But everybody can do something. Everybody is needed. And that's the word for us on this, I think, is that the good work can be anything. Because there is nothing that God can't take. It can be a conversation that Raylan has with a friend at school. That can be the good work. It can be Molly being generous to someone at school. That's the good work. It can be helping out someone in the neighborhood. It can be anything that you allow God's love for people and your love for God to come together. When those come together, good work for God's kingdom is accomplished. And then there's also the more planned ones. The things that we say, this is what we're about as a church. Those are good work too. We're about loving our community. We're about serving. Our efforts for rice and beans was a good work. The contribution that we've been able to make to the soup kitchen in Honduras is good work. And the work that we're about to do on the sanctuary is good work. It's good work. Why? Well, there's a building work. Why? Because these buildings are tools. That's all they are, guys. They're tools. There's something put in our hands that God can use to express His love for this community. Now, if we use it and think of it differently than that, then we're probably going to be off track. But I believe that we got that. We get this. That sanctuary is a tool. That's all it is. It's a wonderful tool. It's one that God has blessed this congregation with for a long time. This piece of land is a tool. It's not the church. You're the church. We get that. But it's a tool in our hand that says we can gather here. We can use this to minister others. We can use this to celebrate other people and celebrate what God's done in our lives. That's the good work. And we all have something to contribute. None of us can do it all, but all of us can do something. There was something else that was really interesting about these efforts of good work. Let's take Nehemiah, for example. They weren't just building a building, a wall, were they? I mean, you see that, right? You see that there was a physical structure that's being built. And you see how it goes all the way around, it's completed, and that's exciting, and it provides safety and all those things for them that was important. But something else was happening, wasn't it? A community was being rebuilt. A community that had been in exile, that had been abused, that had been neglected. It was being rebuilt. And you know what? I am optimistic enough to believe that that's what God does with the good works that we're a part of. He not only accomplishes the work, but He does something in us. He doesn't just build buildings, He rebuilds people. And as we work on that sanctuary, we're going to ask God for that. He's not just rebuilding and renovating the sanctuary. He can use that to renovate our own hearts. Renovate the hearts of our church. There's no congregation on the planet that doesn't need that. We all need that. It always works both ways with God. It's cool. When we try to use what we have in service to Him, He somehow gives it back as a gift to us and working on our own hearts. And that's what I believe He'll do. As we're building a building, as we're rebuilding a building, He will be rebuilding us as well. So again, it'll take all of us. It'll take all of us. And then you know what? If you think about those work days, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know about you guys. There's something that happens to this group when we work together. You guys are as good at that as anybody I've ever seen. You like to work together. You like to do things together. And there's something really special that happens. I look forward to those work days. Do I believe that the good work of this church is just about that sanctuary? Of course not. It's a tool. It's a tool, but I think in doing that, we're going to continue to discover how God has gifted us and how He wants to utilize that tool for this community. That's going to be exciting. So I look forward to us just to continuing the process of working together. As Nehemiah gathered, and I've said this the last couple of weeks with these sermons, but as Nehemiah gathered with the leaders and they talked about this, how did they end it? They said, let the good work begin. And that would be an appropriate way for us to end every Sunday we come to this place, we recenter ourselves with God. It's so easy. We get distracted during the week and there's so much going on. And we realign and we pause. And it's 1 hour and we breathe and we worship and we pray and we listen to His Word. And every Sunday should be about, all right, we've refueled, we've recentered, we're ready to go. Now let the good work begin. Now we walk outside these doors and we will be the church. We are the church. And then we're going to need to refuel again 6 more days later, right? And we're going to come back. And we're going to do it again. And then we're going to look at each other and we're going to say, let the good work begin. Let it begin. So that's where we'll leave it today. Let the good